On this relatively unassuming pub in Cambridge, UK, on a cold night in December 1984, the CEOs of, at the time, the most important computer companies in the UK, Sir Clive Sinclair and Chris Curry, reportedly started an argument that ended up in a fistfight. Like many, I became aware of this historical footnote via a movie called Micromen, which I will consider part of the sacred triforce of great movies about computer and game history, and that featured a dramatized version of this fight as a plot point. A version of this fight that, ironically, is more historically accurate than the current Wikipedia article, which tells you how obscure this whole thing actually is. In interviews, real-life Chris Curry seems often surprised that people pay so much attention to this one large irrelevant thing, so of course, over the last 3 years, I have developed a very normal micro-obsession with it, not because of the fight, but because of the fascinating circumstances surrounding it. And let me tell you why I find this interesting. The full story of Acorn and Sinclair I already made a video of, but the short version is that Sinclair research, led by Sir Clive Sinclair, had made a spectacularly successful ZX Spectrum computer, and one of Acorn's founders was Chris Curry, who used to be Sir Clive's second-in-command, but that left over a series of differences, and that had created the also very successful BBC Micro. And apparently, both companies were holding their Christmas parties at the same time on Friday, 21st December 1984, in this very same pub. It strikes me as a little bit odd that these two rival companies will be making a Christmas party in the same pub at the same time, but as my English friends have reminded me, especially before the internet, like the pub was the quintessential place that you will go to meet friends, and given that it's very likely that one company had a lot of ex-employees of the other, this was probably just the pub that they will go to after work anyway. Tensions must have been running high. On the side of Sinclair, the Spectrum had been a huge success, particularly as a gaming machine, which Sir Clive reportedly had very little interest in, and wanted to push the company into making a business-oriented computer, which he had rushed to market that same year to terrible reviews and even worse sales. And he was less than a month away from unveiling an electrical vehicle, his true passion, and getting the company to sell shares to the public in March. This will go catastrophically, and the company will have to be acquired to survive, and likely some of the people in this party knew this. Acorn was not doing great either. They had unsuccessfully tried to get the BBC Micro to the US, and they had lost a ton of money on the way, and their low-cost Acorn Electron had missed its intended release date due to technical issues, which we covered in a video before, and had sold terribly as a result. There was hope. A division within the company was developing what was going to be their most successful project, the ARM processor, which is likely the ancestor of the device you're using to watch this, but they were months away from first working silicon, and the company was seriously in debt. They will end up selling most of it in February, and likely some of the people in this party knew this. So the spark to this pile of gunpowder was an advert. In the Daily Mirror, December 15, 1984, just 1 week before this party, Acorn had run an ad showing newspaper clips that were highlighting the reliability issues with the Spectrum. If you wanted a computer that will stay at home for Christmas, you need an Acorn. Ouch! Now, I have no idea if Sir Clive had actually seen the advert before and had spent a week fuming about it, or if someone pointed the advert out to him while during the party. But what we do know is that in this bar he attacked Chris with a rolled up newspaper. My personal theory is that it was exactly the same newspaper that had the advert, but we can never know for sure. But unlike what happens in the movie, they did not devolve into a fistfight just yet. At some point, probably when the party was wrapping up, Chris relocated to a nearby wine bar called Shades. Shades no longer exist, but digging up a bit, we managed to zero in on where it used to be, which is here, where this restaurant now stands. Sir Clive, either chasing Chris or just accidentally going to the same wine bar, reportedly grabbed Chris by the back of the head, at which point Chris, who by no means appears to be a violent person, lost his patience and smacked him in the face. On December 24th, the very next Monday, newspapers started getting wind of the event, and perhaps the funniest coverage of this whole thing was from famous columnist Jean Rook, which for many years had a reputation for flamboyance and colorful coverage of all sorts of topics in the British society at the time, which made her the best female paid journalist until that point. In the very first January edition of her column, she commented on the fight and how suddenly it gave the men involved a certain level of appeal.
I got fuse-blowingly excited over the war games between computer chief Sir Clive Sinclair and Chris Curry, who zapped each other in a wine bar during the season of ill will. Doubtless illogically, I was convinced until then that men who invent computers are cool-headed humanoids who do everything by remote control. Geniuses who never tamper with buttons just for the fun of it. The explosive physical punch-up between Sinclair and Curry has put a whole new graphic description on computer makers. Have they not eyes, hands, senses, passions, and even organs just like any other men? If you prick them, then do they not turn bloody-minded? If you tickle them, do they not whip round to see if anyone is interfering with their gadgets? If you drop a poisonous remark about one of their products, do they not wax green and spit back all the incorrect information you fed them? Until now, I've never envied a woman who is hooked up to an electronic genius. Now I wonder if playing around with one might give you the ultimate ecstatic jolt.
Another fun coincidence is that one of the articles that talk about the fight was in the Daily Mirror, owned by magnate Robert Maxwell, which if you also like the movies that I like, you might remember as the bad guy in the Tetris movie.
Robert Maxwell, chairman of the Mirror Group.
Wow.
A few months from this incident, he will make an offer to buy Sinclair Research.
Do you think he's going to find new markets for the Sinclair computers?
Well, yes, and I think Maxwell will do with Sinclair the simple things that he's done with the other companies that he's brought round. He will cut the costs where he can, and he'll try and find new markets. Now, one part of the world which is crying out for home computers is the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc. And Maxwell, as is well known, has very close contacts at the highest level with the Soviet Union, and I'm sure he will try and get deals to sell Sinclair computers over there by the 100,000 if he possibly can.
Sir Clive and his colleagues have developed, as it turns out, a Cyrillic face for his pocket computer.
It has been said of Mr. Maxwell in the past that he wasn't a person fit to run a public company. Do you have any qualms about this deal with him now? If he's not then there it is, and to say such a thing would be outrageous.
Which did not seem to go through. And in that same page before, you can see Maxwell himself in an article about a magician that had this trick to make millions of pounds disappear, which is very funny, because Maxwell was a true magician in making millions disappear.
Father, the company's pension manager called and said there was a few £1 million missing from the employees' retirement fund last week.
Yes.
Ultimately, the Sinclair Research brand was sold to Amstrad and just disappeared from history. Acorn was sold to an Italian company, Olivetti, and mostly disappeared from history, although their processor technology will have a life of its own. But the people partying here in December 1984 had no idea. All they could do was drink, hope, and maybe fight a little.